Welcome to the September 18th, 2018 City Planning Commission meeting. We'll start the meeting with a roll call.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Gibb-Randall.
Here.
Commissioner Woods.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We're all.
Commissioner Briggs is here.
Oh, Commissioner Briggs.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's all
Commissioner Briggs.
We are all here.
That's right.
9, yeah.
Do we have any introductions this evening? It doesn't look like it. Approval of agenda. We have one minor change in our agenda for this evening, and that is under 5 minutes of previous meeting. We do not have the June 19th, 2018 meeting, so I will strike that. And do I have a commissioner who will move it, the agenda as amended? Commissioner Woods, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Our agenda is approved. Moving on to minutes of previous meeting, we have the minutes from October 17th, 2017 meeting. Do I have a commissioner that would like to move? Commissioner Weatherby, seconded by Commissioner Ackerman. Any discussion, changes? Seeing no one, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, moving on to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers and committees, written communications and petitions. And we will first start with our City Council representative, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. City Council met last night. On the agenda, we discussed the transportation plan. As many of us know, this body is responsible for facilitating the master planning process that the city undergoes with some regularity. A major element of our master plan is our transportation plan, which helps set a vision for how people will get around Ann Arbor into the future. We are moving forward with hiring a premier consulting firm, Sam Schwartz Consulting, out of New York City. So it's going to be an exciting year or two as we put together this plan, looking towards many more modes of transportation than we ever have before, as well as developments in the autonomous space. So very much an exciting time for transportation policy and a much needed update after 10 years. In addition to that, site-specific actions, 151 Hoover near the Michigan Stadium was approved last night. The cottages at Barton Green on Pontiac Trail was denied last night. And with respect to the library lot, in line with the sales agreement that was approved by City Council in April of 2017, City Council last night approved covenants for both the workforce housing requirements as well as our parking permit agreement.
Thank you. Moving on to our acting planning manager, Ms. Thatcher.
Well, Councilmember Ackerman just basically gave what I was going to say about the petitions last night, so I have no further report.
Thank you. Any planning commission officers and committees that would like to report? Commissioner Gibb-Randall.
I am the partner to the DDA's committee for their partners who represent many different facets of the city. And piggybacking on Commissioner Ackerman's points about transportation, the AATA will be doing a big reevaluation of all of their routes next year. So that will be feeding in, and as we are, really focusing on thinking about transportation routes and where we're placing our development, that has some bearing on that. So just to know that that's all coming, and that if there are things that we're seeing where there's pressures and things like that we're hearing from people that come and speak to us, in addition to where we're putting higher density because they're on transportation route, it pertains to us. So next year is their big year for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Woods.
I just have a question either for Commissioner Ackerman or the other commissioners, and that is, can you give us an update on the birds which have recently come to our town? By that, I'm talking about those.
Sorry, it's funny you asked that because City Council's been getting a lot of emails about the chimney swifts, which are a species of bird that have moved into 415 West Washington's chimney and are edging closer to becoming an endangered species, unfortunately. But the bird scooters, yes, I'm happy to give an update. The city will allow use of the birds in the public right-of-way for the time being. The only element of our ordinance that I believe the bird scooters are violating is with respect to the storage in the public right-of-way. For the time being, until the Transportation Commission and ultimately City Council can address how best to deal and regulate with this matter, the city will only confiscate scooters that are blocking city sidewalks and violating the ADA. We are actively in communication with their regional representative to work out an agreement through which we can build a legal relationship and set some parameters.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have anything they'd like to discuss or report on? Seeing no one, moving on to written communications and petitions. We have some written communications that arrived in our packet, so please take a look at that. And then moving on to audience participation. At this time, any persons wishing to address the City Planning Commission in regards to an item that is not on the agenda, this is your opportunity to step forward and address the commission. You'll have 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to address the Planning Commission in regards to a petition, or in regards to anything that is not going to be a public hearing later on this evening? Seeing no one jumping up, we will move on to public hearings scheduled for our next meeting. Ms. Thatcher.
There's one public hearing scheduled for October 2. That's the 132 Hill Street multifamily residential site plan for City Council approval. It's a proposal to construct an 11,600 square foot, 5-unit multifamily dwelling in an R4C zoning district.
Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business, 617 Packard Street special exemption use permit and site plan for City Planning Commission approval. Ms. Thatcher.
As you'll all remember, this was postponed from the last meeting. We were waiting for some more information to go back and forth about the traffic review from staff and the petitioners, but things have all been worked out now. This site's on the north side of Packard Street between Hill and Arbor. It's in the Triangle. It's Zone C1A Campus Business District, which allows medical marijuana provisioning centers with a special exception use approval, which is what this petition is for. It's a 1,879 square foot site. It's a very small site with a currently two-unit building with 2,112 square feet of floor area. One Class B and one Class C, that is a typo. Bicycle parking spaces are proposed along the northwest side of the building and behind the building, and there are no other changes to the site that are proposed by the petitioner. Here is the triangle on an aerial view. If we zoom in, you can see the site right here. It's currently occupied by the pastry peddler on the little storefront on the sort of southerly end, and upstairs is PJ's Used Records, which actually closed this summer permanently. Next door is Alibaba, which may not be called that anymore. Babadari, thank you. They recently had a large remodel. And to the south is a package store, liquor store. A couple of photos. There's the pastry peddler. So there's a door to this suite downstairs. If you go up a couple stairs, you can get into what used to be a house and has been retail for many years. And right now this wraps around the building. There's a ramp here. One of the bike parking spaces is proposed to go sort of on the bottom of this ramp, and the other one is proposed to go around the back of the building. This is the proposed site plan. There's existing trash receptacle storage on the side and in the back. This is that ramp that we talked about. Here's where the bike parking space would go for the Class B, which is covered under an awning. And the Class C is in the back. It's intended more for employee use. And let me go over some of the Staff comments. So the site is more than 600 feet from any other provisioning center. The map is at the end of the staff report if you'd like to see it. And it's more than 1,000 feet from any K-12 school. All of the required documentation has been provided. The site's at the center of the Packard Hill State Triangle. It's surrounded by retail businesses and restaurants. It's really a pedestrian-centered block. There is no parking on this site, obviously. There is street parking on the meters on both sides of Packard and on State and on Hill, but there is no lot specifically for this business. The city traffic engineer had some concerns about this, which were adequately addressed. This area is a tough area for pedestrian vehicle crashes especially, and it will be studied next year using a federal grant. And the petitioners have been responsive by promising to do things like provide bus passes to their employees, put in the extra bike hoops that they can try to keep them from having to drive in. And, but really it's a sort of a pedestrian centered retail location. Planning staff believes that the intensity and character of the business is compatible with the block and surroundings for mostly walk-up foot traffic. Sidewalks are in good condition. There are no natural features on the site. And this would be medical marijuana provisioning only. Staff has not received any concerns from surrounding neighbors. And the proposed hours are 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday and noon to 7 p.m. on Sunday. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open public hearing on this petition. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition? Please step up to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Unless you're the petitioner, you'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Encore Rungta, and this is my company, QPS Michigan Holdings. I just wanted to give a brief introduction. I live here in Ann Arbor with my wife and my 2 children. I've been here for a long time. I went to undergrad and to law school at the University of Michigan. This company, QPS Michigan, has now been approved at the state level for licensing. We're excited to have this opportunity. Thank you for taking the time today. I have Rob and Tom from Midwestern here who can answer any questions about the site plan. Brian as well, who's been advising us on the operational side. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition?
Hi, good evening. Brian Fennick on behalf of the petitioner. Once again, I'd just like to thank you all for taking the time to review this petition, and we'd like to thank staff as well for all the hard work that went into it. This was an irregular type of a project, I think, in terms of the location, and staff was really responsive with the petitioner and with the other consultants on resolving these issues. So thank you all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, finds the petition substantially meet the standards in Chapter 55 Ann Arbor Unified Development Code, Section 5.29.5, Special Exemption Use, and Section 5.16.3.g, Medical Marijuana Facility, and therefore approves the 617 Packard Street Special Exemption Use for a medical marijuana provisioning center. This approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the C1A campus business district, which provides neighborhood shopping for the university-oriented population and includes retail establishments, offices, personal services, theaters, and pinball parlors. 2, the proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersections based on the location. Packard Street provides access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with the surrounding traffic impact. 3, Through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding waste disposal, inventory tracking, security, and other methods of operation of the facility, the provisioning center will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or area and will not have a detrimental impact on natural features. The special exemption use approval is based on the following conditions. 1, the petitioner obtaining and maintaining both a state of Michigan medical marijuana license and a City of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit, and providing documentation to the planning services within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval of date of this petition. 2, the petitioner operating a medical marijuana business at this address within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval of this petition. 3, the petitioner will install bicycle parking on the site as shown on sheet 4 site plan of the plan set by October 31st, 2018. 4, the special exemption use may occupy no more than 2,112 square feet of the entire building. 5, the petitioner will maintain operating hours of 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. Sunday, and that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exemption use standards and no physical development of the property is proposed. Do you have a commissioner that will move? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. We are now in discussion. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is maybe an engineering question. So I am all about bicycle parking. That's usually the thing that I ask. I'm curious though if the bicycle parking on the ramp is going to leave enough ramp left over for ADA compliance.
Yes, it will, and also on the Rob Wagner with Midwestern Consulting. Also, we are putting a stop behind the bicycle so it doesn't roll down the ramp, and building up a platform kind of level so that the bicycle stays there. But yes, it will have the width for ADA access.
So is it a hoop on a pad, or like how is that going to work?
Yep, and we have a detail on our site plan sheet, but it's a hoop. It's fastened to the, there's bolts that fasten it to the wood ramp. Yep.
Got it. So it would be usually on a hoop you can park 2 bicycles, but this is going to be right up against the building, presumably, to leave enough room so it's only 1 bicycle that's parked there. Is that right?
No, two could fit there. Yep, two bicycles could fit there. Yep, and we're only required 1 bicycle hoop, and we're providing 2, so one additional hoop.
Okay.
Yep, so 2 additional spaces.
Got it. And then I was actually, thanks for coming to this screen, because I was going to ask about the bicycle hoop around the back, and like, I think that makes a lot of sense if there's a door there, and there is, so that's fantastic.
Yep, and I don't know if you can zoom out, but there's the details kind of on the right side of the sheet as well, so, but, okay, well, we're good.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
Stay up if you could. So I know we have a distorted view, but I guess the first question is, as a biker, it would be a whole lot easier to park in the right-of-way. Was there any discussion with staff about potentially, staying out of the main pathway, but there's plenty of bike hoops that are in the right-of-way and throughout the downtown, and it would be way more welcoming and easier for a biker to use that? Was there ever any discussion around having that as an option rather than it being completely around the corner and out of the way and something that nobody's really going to notice?
Jill could answer, but I could start by saying we recently went through the Glen Hotel and were asked to move the bike hoops out of the right-of-way, so I guess I began that way, but we would be happy to add a bike hoop in the right-of-way if that's what the Planning Commission would like.
This is out of the DDA?
Correct.
Correct? Mm-hmm. Because I know they have some standards around some of that, and so I don't want to tread on any of that. And perhaps, Ms. Thatcher, you have some thoughts on what makes sense here?
It's something that we could look into, but like the Glen, which is also outside of the DDA, it's a little different than inside the DDA,
Right.
which is a little bit easier for placing stuff in the right of way.
Right. I don't want to hold things up. It's more that it just seems not very intuitive as a biker. Then the other, could you go back to the
Which one?
I don't know who's controlling.
That's me.
That's you, okay. So typically, I have a hard time seeing how it's going to be 2, because it needs to be 4 feet wide if it's 2, because you need 2 feet on either side. And when I see the dimensioning of the walkway further up, it only says it's 2 feet wide. I could see it being next to, because you can't, the hoops are usually 4 feet apart with 2 feet of parking on either side, so you can actually get your bike in there.
Right.
So how
I
would
mean-
you have enough leftover space there to be able to have a hoop and 2 bikes?
I mean, I would think one would be able to be fastened on like the north side of the hoop and one fastened on the south side, kind of staggered, like you would on a bike rack on the back of a car.
So in other
know.
words, you don't have 2 feet on either side? There isn't a 4-foot pad there for it that is separate from the pathway? Because otherwise that thing would be
Right,
at
and
least
we
7
could-
feet wide, because it needs to be at least 3. The pathway
Right.
needs to be at least 3.
And we have enough room in the ramp if that is an issue. We could put a second hoop in the ramp and we could provide for 2 bikes that way.
It's not even that I think you should do more or less. It's more just being real about how many bike parking spots you actually have, because I see this and think it's really 1, not 2.
The way the
So-
detail is shown and the way it's represented on the site plan, it's 1.
Oh, it is 1?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So if you're saying it's 1, then I'm cool with that. I just
Yeah.
think that it's really not 2, because it would need to
Right.
be 4 feet wide. As somebody who uses these things,
Yeah.
you can't,
And we are only required 1 in stating we're
that's
providing
fine.
1. so.
I just think, like, be real about what it is. And if it's 1 and that's what you're required, then that's okay. Again, I don't necessarily want to hold things up. I just want to make sure that it's done in a way that makes sense for people to be able to use it. So.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the other piece is, I don't quite get where the entry is for you. Are you taking over the bakery?
Both spaces, the entrances will stay the same. So he'll have both entrances. So we're taking over both the bakery and the record store. There is, I think it says 2,100 square feet of space. QPS Holdings is only finishing out at this time 1,400 of that,
Which is the ground level?
which the ground and,
And the mid-level as well.
yep, ground level and the mid-level.
Yeah.
So then people will be using, generally speaking, people will be using the current bakery entrance as the way to get in and out?
That'll be the entrance, and there'll be the check-in there, and then the kind of mid-level up will be where the showroom is. There's an exit from that area as well, so they would exit out of a separate entrance.
Okay, I just didn't quite
Yeah.
get how that was working. Alrighty, that's it for now.
Thank you. Further discussion? Commissioner Briggs?
I would like to reiterate that it would be great to see that bike coop parked in the right-of-way for general use for the area. I was wondering, and I think you may have just answered the question on this one, but is that the ramp intended to be used for ADA purposes in terms of wheelchair access, or is that, because I was noticing it seems to be an area where a lot of trash cans are being stored as well, so what is that entry used for?
Yeah, I mean, if you had the different view, you'd see there's a width, at least 3 feet that would provide for barrier-free access on this side of the trash cans. And we're not actually proposing that many refuse containers that you see that they're using right now.
Yeah, we wouldn't create that level of garbage on a regular basis. I'm not sure why there's so many there, but we would be creating a lot less. I believe we have a separate trash enclosure, right, or there's a
Yeah, I
trash.
think we're showing 2 containers, yep. On sheet 4. Yep, and they're tucked kind of towards the building to leave the access on the side.
What's the purpose of that entryway? Where does that lead?
It just leads to the back of the property. No customers would be using it. There is that bike hoop back there, but all the customers would be using those front 2 entrances.
Okay.
Commissioner Woods?
So if I could just follow up, that entrance that we're looking at right now, that will be ADA accessible, correct? But you're saying that all customers will use the front entrance, which is down on the street where looks like someone sitting, is that
Yeah,
correct?
what we've contemplated is putting a lift between that lower level and internally leading up to the top if somebody needed ADA access. I'm not sure if that door and that ramp will be ADA compliant. I'm not sure. I don't know if we've done that level of detailed look at it, but we have contemplated an internal lift to bring people up to that mid-level.
So when you say you've contemplated, I think part of what we need to, at least I need to be able to understand is how folks who need that access, when you say you're contemplating, that's something you might do in the future?
No,
or-
we'll do it now. We're having the space designed on the interior. Yeah, Tom can
Okay.
probably get into some of this.
Yep, if you can go back to the site plan real quick, Jill. So there's a number of accesses to the building. Right there, parallel with Packard, there's the existing building entrance. That's at the first level.
Okay.
Then the bi-level entry is at the ramp or the door there with the stairs and landing. So we think that the landing with the stairs and the ramp were to service the user that currently had that record store area. So it had their barrier-free and stepped, non-barrier-free access. Then there's also a door on the back near where the back bike parking is. So that door, the door on the ramp would be used for loading and unloading, and then customers would enter parallel to Packard and then have a lift or a ramp internal to the building that would get them to that bi-level spot.
So it's actually, once you get inside the building, it's the mid-level or bi-level floor where someone would actually get checked in, that sort of thing? Is that
They'd be
correct?
checked in on the
Checking
low.
on the ground level,
Check in on the
exactly, but
ground,
they could take,
and then you go upstairs.
correct, exactly.
And in order to get upstairs, you'll have a lift or
Internal.
something for people who are ADA.
Correct.
And how will folks who might need the ADA components, how will they know about that if they're just coming down the sidewalk? How does that usually work? Do you have plans for signage or anything like that?
Their main door with their business name would be on the door to Packard, welcoming, saying entrance on it.
Okay, and then would you
The
have
Packard
something that
lower.
would indicate with a sign or something to go around the side or something? I'm just trying to
No,
understand this.
If you were a customer of QPS Holdings, you would enter the door at Packard, which is zero grade, ADA
Okay, right there.
accessible. And then if you're in there and you're moving to the next bi-level part, there would either be a lift or a small internal ramp that you would use,
Okay.
like a hall ramp, to get to that second level.
Okay, all righty.
And then there would be, the ramp would serve as an emergency exit if needed,
Okay,
so that there's two routes.
thank you. And so, Ms. Thatcher, I guess we don't normally go into detail about the setup inside of a building. Is that correct? Okay, all right.
It's often been provided, but
Okay. I don't know that we've had many that had this sort of second level part to it. And generally, I think it's like all one floor, so that's why.
And that access will be required by building code before they can get a
Building
certificate of
code,
occupancy.
Okay,
So a wheelchair user or someone else would have to have that access before the business could open.
okay. And so is that then something that's just going to be covered where it says, or where would it indicate that on their, on our motion at least? Just that,
Well, our motion says that they are required to obtain a City of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit. In order to get a permit, you must have a certificate of occupancy.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I've engaged a local architect who's working on that plan from Hobbs and Black, who's pretty familiar with the city, who will make sure that we meet all the requirements in terms of ADA and access and all those things.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, just to bring up Electric Eye Cafe and that multi-level provisioning center, just like with that one as well, if they do decide to use the lift, or if they find that it's more convenient for them to provide a small dispensing area for people who would require to have, would normally require a lift, then they would obviously use that, technique as well. as opposed to having them to have to go upstairs, just bringing it down to them, as long as there's a secure and private area for that to occur on the ground floor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So, fairly disappointed in the disappearance of Pastry Peddler, but, which is the closest to my office, so, but one of the questions I had was, one of the things that you see a lot is, although you have no parking, Babadari does have what looks like quite a lot of parking for the average person. And I know that they are very particular about that parking because they use it and that's kind of, they count on it. Have you spoken with them or talked to them or encouraged or kind of made it clear to, are you going to make it clear to your patients that there will be no parking there? Because I can see that being a
Yeah.
pretty big bone of
Yeah,
contention.
I think we'll put some kind of signage to that effect, and I think we'll notify people. We're hopefully gonna have a good relationship with our neighbors, that's the intention, so, yeah, but we'll be extra focused on that.
Yeah, because I just think that could be a
Yeah,
problem.
and our hope is that hopefully most of our customers will be coming from the immediate vicinity.
Yeah.
That's the expectation, so.
And then, I think along with the traffic being discussed in the future, like the pedestrian, and that is a big problem, and people go straight across, and I imagine you'll get that same, you know, people coming from the neighborhood coming straight across rather than going to one of the lights.
Oh, I see.
And just, again, if you can kind of just tell people that that's probably not the best until, I assume somehow that will be dealt with when the city is, but that's a big problem right there, and Pastry Peddler didn't help that, because a lot of people would run across the street, and
Sure.
my guess is.
Campus corner.
Yeah, and Campus Corner door is right there too,
Right.
so, that's just another, it's not a, I mean, it's not your fault, but.
Sure, no, it's a consideration.
It just kind of the,
I think one thing also that's being discussed alongside the plan that was thought out with regards to traffic and with the traffic engineer, but also too when there's some marketing things that they want to incorporate as well that will make it more attractive to people who live, you know, within the general vicinity, people who show a bus pass, people who come in on a bird, you know, and just be able to kind of, you know, hey, today's bike in day, or, you know, whatever kind of walk-in Wednesday, and allow those people, you know, kind of build that sense of walkability through promotions and things of that nature. And also, while they're engaging them, they have an opportunity to tell them, hey, you know, cross at the crosswalk, please. Don't run across here. And I don't think that when you look at I think that while they're next to Campus Corner, they won't have the same clientele as Campus Corner. And I think that the people who will be, you know, the patients who will be using this facility and their clients will be a little bit more mature age and probably a little bit less likely to, you know, want to play Frogger on State Street or Packard.
and you do have the parking spots right in front, so that's.
Right. And in fact, believe it or not, my barber is around the corner, and you know, he does my beard and my son's hair. But all times of day, I'm usually, if you do want to drive there, I've had, I don't know, maybe I have extremely good luck, but I've always found that there's been a parking spot or a meter available. And I mean, I'm talking Saturday morning, the barber shop is full, and you know, Saturday morning, I find a spot, and I'm just kind of like, oh, must be my day. But I guess not. I've seen other people nod, so I guess I'm not that lucky. But point being is, you know, there are other parking spots out in front, but they want to encourage local traffic, foot traffic.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Gabrandel.
So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm confused by something. When I look at your site plan, I see ramp, and I see 2 lines on either side of it. Then I see a section where the bike hoop parking is going to be, and then it narrows quite a bit, and I see a door. Could you go to the photo that shows the side of that building? To me, that looks like the ramp goes all the way up to the edge of that corner. So does that mean that your bike hoop is on the ramp itself? Like it is at an angle?
But our site plan shows that we have a stop behind it, and we're building up a platform to make it level. So planning staff did catch that, and we addressed it by
So you're
building.
making just the the bike hoop level, or the bike hoop pad level?
Yeah, we're building kind of like a level landing for the bike hoop.
So how do you get the bike up to the level landing?
You just lift it up on there.
You lift it up?
Yeah.
The ramp is roughly 8 feet around, so if you were riding your bike, you'd stop at the ramp, wheel it up, set it, and lock it up. So ramp and the bike space
Yeah.
would be level like that. So you'd wheel it up and lock it to the hoop.
Okay. This just seems awfully convoluted. Like, can't we just put a bike hoop on the street out there? It just seems.
The trouble is, it wouldn't be a Class B, which is required. They're trying to accommodate the Class B code requirement by putting it under the awning.
I mean, the other opportunity would be to slide it further down. We only have two of the, you see how there's 4
Right.
containers? We're only having 2 containers of that spot, so where those 2 black containers are, where it's flat, we could slide it down the wall there.
It's not even the issue for me, it's more just that I don't think as a cyclist that I'm gonna go around the corner and think that there's a ramp with a bike
Yeah.
over there.
So-
And so, again, like, I don't wanna stop you guys up, but it just seems like, geez,
In order-
can we just have a bike hoop in the, not in the main pathway, but it was what, 11 feet wide the sidewalk was there, 11 something? Can there be one that's parallel between those 2 parking meters? It just, I don't know, it just feels,
We can look into it.
And
does
also,
anybody else feel this way? Because it feels so counterintuitive to go around the corner up a ramp to use as a cyclist. And I think it's great that you all are doing a bike hoop. I just would like to see it something that's more used. There's no street tree there. There's nothing else in the way. You can't put a wheelchair down through there anyway because you already have the parking meters there. Could we just move it around the corner so it goes in the right of way in an area that, it's 11 feet. It's worse in other places, actually, and there's already things in the way anyway.
yes, I think, and we're discussing here, I think that we get so caught up in these projects with what we, should do. We don't
Right.
think about what we could do. And I mean, we're standing here and we're just like, why don't we just do both? I mean, a Class A or Class B is required, yeah. So we'll put the Class B in the most, appropriate place on the side, but then also go above and beyond and say, this is not required, but let's just do one on the street as well, wherever it conforms. And I think that if that were a condition, I don't think that would be something that would be
Shannon?
frowned
So
upon.
could we make a
If,
condition?
if I could make a statement, to put a bike hoop in the public right-of-way requires a license agreement and a lot of time and effort from the city attorney's office to create the agreement and everything. But I think we have an opportunity, can you go back to the site plan real quick? Do you see how the building sits kind of with a sliver of land between the building and the right-of-way?
Yeah.
On the,
Yes.
if we could attach, they make the hoops that
Yep.
attach, I'm gonna say it's like a garden hose
Yep.
holder. If we could attach something there, we would at least get one bike parking spot there, and it would be a dimension likely, I don't know, what are they usually, 12 inches, 18 inches off of the wall, which would fit in that section, be outside of the right-of-way and could be usable by
As
a
long as you
patron.
have your 6 foot clear, you know what I'm saying, in terms of the,
Along the walk,
in
parallel to
terms
the
of,
building,
right,
sure.
exactly, then I think that sounds great, to have, because I get it, and again, I don't want to hold you guys up, and I understand that that takes a lot of doing. But it would be, it's, you see so many bikes chained to trees and things like that in this area.
Jill, can you go
And I
back to
think
the picture
people,
of the front?
like, if you're encouraging people to get there in that way, then I think it would be great to have an option
Yeah,
for people.
and if you see between the window and the
Yeah.
brick, there would be a pretty good spot for it.
Yeah.
I mean, the tables and chairs wouldn't be there, obviously, but.
Right.
Commissioner
No,
Sauvé.
it's
I'll
an
just add a
addition.
comment. Like, to get the Class B, we need the covered overhang, and so that would just be the condition that we need to find a space for it. But I think it sounds like additional
yeah,
is
yeah.
part of the support of the
Additional's good.
business, so I'm in support of the project in that regard. In terms of other things that we usually cover, we talk about hours of operations pretty often, and I would just say that this aligns with everything on the block, so I'm in support relative to that. Just trying to consistently check the boxes that we
Right.
usually discuss to make sure that we're going through the same details. Sounds like traffic engineering is good, so I think, yeah, I support kind of, and it sounds like the business supports the additional exploration. I don't want to hold you guys up, but to have that kind of enforced desire for you to do it would be great to see.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Thatcher, do you have a recommendation for an amendment to add a 6th condition to spell out a hypothetical bike hoop not contained in the site plan?
Yeah, I'm struggling with it a little bit because I'm
Yeah.
concerned that the bike hoop will go on private property, but the bike will be on the sidewalk. So I hate to make it a condition of approval because it might not be possible.
Could it be explored?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Good faith
So-
effort.
Yeah, right.
So I would move to amend the motion to add a 6th condition. It would say the petitioner will work with city staff to explore the possibility of adding an on-wall bike hoop parallel to Packard.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Gabrandel. Any discussion on the amendment? Commissioner Woods.
So, just, since this is a special exception use, does that, putting that bike hoop against this private property, does that mean that that stays with it forever? Or for how long?
Yeah, it's a nominal site
Okay,
improvement that would
all right.
be expected to remain.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so do we have, are we setting precedent by doing that, or what's the?
Well.
Because you seem hesitant, and I know that this is sort of like an on-the-spot kind of idea which has come to us, which is important, but I don't want to really start making too many changes and then realize down the road, that didn't really work that well, even though we thought it would.
The way the amendment is worded, to explore the possibility of an on-wall bike hoop on Packard, I think it doesn't necessarily hold them to the requirement that it be installed. If I go up to city engineering tomorrow and they say, no, you can't do that, that's not an appropriate place for the bike because it's in the public right-of-way, we would want the bikes over there instead, then we can start talking about, well, then let's put a hoop over there, you know. But I think that this is worded correctly to start a discussion about it, and while not necessarily requiring something that we're not sure can be installed.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sauvé.
I guess the counter is, if we go back to the study with the city and are sure that it's okay, does that language actually require it to then be implemented? Because it sounds like the condition just requires the exploration and not the requirement if the exploration shows that it's feasible.
And also, if I may add, to the contrary, if it's not feasible, you know, to
Just
have
redact
language
it.
in there that says, I mean, one way or another, that it's, you know, the exploring language is a bit vague, and I think it could lead to some interesting
It's neither
interpretations
required
down the
or
road.
non-required.
Commissioner Ackerman.
I would like to move what I hope is a friendly amendment to the amendment. The petition, so condition 6, proposed condition 6, the petitioner will the petitioner will work with city staff to explore the installation of an on-wall bicycle parking spot parallel to Packard, and with appropriate staff approvals, install such bicycle parking hoop.
Is that friendly? It's friendly. Commissioner Trudeau.
Did that language include the if feasible that
Thank you.
Shannon chimed in with there? Because I would support it if the word feasible was in there.
I agree.
Is feasible friendly?
That's friendly.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment of adding number 6? I would love to have Ms. Thatcher read it.
I think I got the feasible in the right place. Just 6. Petitioner will work with staff to explore the installation of an on-wall bike hoop on Packard, and if feasible, and with appropriate staff approvals, install it. Is that the right place? All right.
All right, further discussion on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're back to the main motion. Further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to our regular business, which is approval of planning commission, regular business 10A, approval of planning commission subcommittees and designees. And we have a chart that's here, and we'll open it up to discussion. I don't think we have a public hearing on this.
No.
All right, so I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby approves Planning Commission committee assignments as presented, including elimination of the Allen Creek Greenway Committee designee. Do you have a commissioner that moves? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. I'm happy to discuss now. Commissioner Briggs.
I sent out a message earlier today, but if there's anybody trying to hop off of ORC, I know that was kind of a hard sell last time. I have thought about it and I'm willing to.
So that is great news, because I wasn't supposed to be in the ORC. I think I'd given it up to somebody else, so we can just take me off of it and put you on it. Unless somebody else wants to jump up at this point. Commissioner Sauvé.
I'll stay on ORC, but I'd like to be added to master planning. I think that was a miss from what we agreed during working session.
We will add you to master planning. And Commissioner Mills.
I am trying to look over, because we don't have a copy over here. I think, does that now put 5 of us on master planning? And so I think I volunteered to step off of master planning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, so just to bring us up to speed, Commissioner Briggs is now on the ORC. Commissioner Mills is no longer on the master plan review. Commissioner Milstein is no longer on ordinance revisions. And Commissioner Sauvé is now on the master plan review. Is that correct? Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, thank you. Moving on to 10B, approval of proposed work scope for evaluation and recommendations on downtown building design process. Ms. Thatcher.
I don't know a whole lot of background on this, except that City Council directed the Planning Commission to come up with a proposal for the design review process. And this is the first draft. It's very tweakable if you guys want to change anything before forwarding it to City Council. I don't know how many concerns there are about it, or if this is just a first step and changeable in the future.
Discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Thatcher, if you don't know, or if this isn't yet determined, would the price tag of $75,000 to $150,000, would that come out of planning and building services budget, or would you be looking, do you know where that budget item would live?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and that's unrestricted funds?
I do not know that.
Okay. I would say, I think you guys put together a really beautiful scope of work. I think this is really comprehensive and would provide a lot of value. It ultimately, when making budget decisions and looking for trade-offs, it's a large price tag. And I feel like there's so much more pressure from the community to re-examine zoning and engagement process and design standards in neighborhoods more than there is downtown these days. And so it would be I love the work product. The price tag is just, it is what it is.
Commissioner Sobe?
I wonder if there's a way, it says to, review the downtown guidelines, but part of the evaluation is to assess kind of background feedback from other communities and reports. And so if the report that we request that the study actually does a city-wide report of the design review guide recommendations, not just for the downtown design review, so that we have like a holistic report back to look at, even if all isn't implemented for the design review process. So we're getting more information out of that study.
I think
There's a way
that
that-
would be a substantial increase in the amount of work.
I think,
I believe city council instructed us to look at the downtown area,
But
and
if-
specifically at D1 and D2.
if the 5 to 10 comparison communities based on size of community, physical development pattern of community, and market comparison, right? Evaluation of voluntary process and codified design requirements via examples of benchmark communities and best practices. If that effort happens to define the city instead of a district within the city, I might be open to, figuring out what that definitive bound, if that's already an effort to look at example cities. And so I'm not sure if that would actually be additional work, but it might be additional information for us to work with.
Commissioner Gabranda?
I think it would be actually a lot of additional work because the design guidelines are specifically for downtown, and downtown's really different than how we do everything else, and the design review board only looks at downtown as it is right now. So I think that is thinking, I think it would be great, but I think it's a huge scope change, because this is contained for our high-rise zones, basically. And what I hear Commissioner Ackerman saying is that the stuff that we've been hearing about is from a lot of neighborhoods too, and their reactions to things. We haven't had as much straight downtown development in the last 2 years. There's been some, but there hasn't been as much, and I think the more kind of controversial projects have been things that are further out, and we've had some, but I think that it would be a big scope change to look at the zoning, and we don't have the same kind of design requirements for the neighborhoods as we do for the downtown. There's all kinds of really specific things around, you can go up 4 floors and you have to step back, and there's all kinds of things that just don't exist for the others. So I think it'd be tricky to add that on to this at this stage of the game.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yeah, sorry, to clarify, I wasn't trying to necessarily open up the Pandora's box of trying to regulate design, in outlying areas, right? That increases cost, that increases time, and ultimately all of that is passed along to home buyers and renters. I think I was just saying, I don't feel since this body recommended to City Council implementing some design requirements and City Council passed that, I think the quality of the downtown developments we're seeing now are higher. I think also that there is been a learning curve with the community, and downtown development isn't as controversial as it once was. I mean, I think we've approved multiple developments on South University, North Main Street, South Main Street, Huron Parkway, or not Huron Parkway, but Huron, none of which brought out a terrible amount of community angst. I think the last one that was particularly controversial was 615 South Main. And so I just, when making budget decisions, which is ultimately City Council's responsibility, this just seems like a large price tag for a problem I'm not positive is still as great as it once was.
Commissioner Mills?
I appreciate that, Commissioner Ackerman. that kind of background and putting it in context, I think that's right. This request was made to us, I think, like in July. So I don't think that things have resolved themselves since July. Maybe it's more like the idea on council was perhaps it was a sticker shock, you know, that it would be a super cheap thing. And at least what we discussed that I think Mr. Leonard has appropriately put in here is that like there has been at some point, and probably even in the last couple of months, some angst that there are maybe ugly buildings in town, in downtown, right? And so, but what, we discussed this at a working session, but to be kind of on the record about it, our sense as a commission was that we, you know, if other places are not getting ugly buildings, we need to find comparable other places and figure out what it is there that they're doing. And so that's not, I think that among the reasons that the sticker price is what it is both you have to figure out what it is that you don't like here, like articulate what's ugly and what's not ugly in other places, and then find those comps. And I think that I would imagine that that's where that price tag comes from. So just to let the public know, like that was part of our discussion, is that both of those steps, which are, I think, put out in lots of good bullets here, are part of what we see as this effort, that you can't just look only at Ann Arbor. It really requires looking elsewhere. And so, yeah, it is a big price tag, and I think that you're absolutely right. Like, I don't know that it's worth it, because that's maybe not the biggest concern that a lot of neighborhoods do have at this time, associated with land use.
And City Council did ask us for, to have us take a look at it and come up with a scope of what it would take to evaluate it. So I think that's what the commission is doing here, and we're sending that message to City Council ultimately, where it falls with the budgetary needs, and if this is really going to work, it's going to end up for City Council to review and approve. Commissioner Ackman?
Just a process question. Would voting for this affirmatively simply send the communication to City Council, or would it also come with a resolution directing you to issue an RFP?
I think what the resolution for an RFP would have to come from City Council. I think this is just voting to, you know, if City Council asks us to look at our process, and we're going back to them with, we're happy to look at it, but this is what it's going to require.
Okay. Then I think people did an amazing job, and I'm grateful for that.
Commissioner Briggs?
Yeah, I think based on the working session, the other piece that's raising the cost of this is specifically the community engagement outcomes of this, that there's a lot built in to be gaining community feedback on perceptions of downtown development, and to do a lot of different, get feedback from a lot of different stakeholders, and that the implementation recommendations suggest that the project scope is to lead to increased likelihood of positive community perception. So it's because of that increased concern around community engagement, I think that's built into this process and increasing the cost. I know talking to a consultant recently, they were talking about the very big differences in communities that want that community engagement versus those who don't, and the cost of those projects. The only thing that I saw in terms of just maybe needing a tweaking, the second bullet point in background, I don't know if I'm the only one. I don't know if it's the comma placement. I don't quite know what that bullet point is saying. It may just be me, but if others are.
Could you clarify which bullet point again?
Second bullet point under background, review of D1 and D2 zoning development standards, comma, and design review ordinance implementation and subsequent amendments, parentheses, including publicly stated intentions. It's just, it may just be me. It just feels a little clunky. If others are reading that fine through, just skip that note.
All right, any further discussion, or does anyone want to remove a comma? All right. So, Commissioner Woods?
this is not about that comma. But just going down to bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, where we do talk about the comparison communities, and maybe this is getting back to an earlier comment by one of the commissioners, that is it clear that we're going to be looking at those 5 to 10 communities, design review ordinances or what have you for their downtown areas? Because I think that's important. And do you think that this, the way we've worded it, will indicate that?
I think with the scope of looking at D1 and D2, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. And what I'm saying is that the comparison communities that we're looking at, if they, I don't, they may call it D1 or D2, I don't know what they call it, but it would be important because we will probably, we could go off and find ourselves out there in that residential communities and where we get a lot of feedback. And just as one of the commissioners said earlier, but we do want to keep it fairly focused in that regard. So if that's clear, that's fine.
Commissioner Mills?
Perhaps to clarify that a little bit more, the sub-bullet underneath there, where it starts include examples of design outcomes, we could say of downtown design outcomes. Just to make it clear that we're not talking about those 5 to 10 communities as a whole, kind of getting to what Commissioner Sauvé had.
Any discussion or any objections to that? Okay. Any other discussion? Commissioner Ackerman?
For the, for the examples, I appreciate Commissioner Mills' point. Could we say downtown or urban area? Just think, I mean, if there's a way that they do, outside of their main commercial core, they do urban design well, I'm still interested in that. Commissioner Gabe Randall has something to say.
Yeah. I think different communities define these areas differently, and so it's tricky, I think, in terms of sort of where urban versus, you know. So I think if it's clear that we're reviewing our downtown design guidelines, and these are in reference to that, into our D1 and D2, it seems like what all of this is saying is within those bounds of comparison communities. I don't know if it needs to be, I mean, clearly if this is going out for an RFP, then things would get, you know, it would be in a completely different format and all that sort of thing. I think the thing that is important especially is that City Council sees that this is about our D1, D2, and that we're studying equivalent areas, whether they're called urban or downtown or whatever, but the equivalent areas in these other benchmark communities. But it seems to me that he's setting the context up at the top, that that's really what we're looking at here. It could be more explicit, but it's really, in some ways, that can be further defined in the actual RFP. That's my sense of it.
Okay. Commissioner Sauvé?
Back to financing a little bit beyond the RFP and the price. There's nothing about, you know, recommendations and outcomes that we might have, and if there's a price tag to that implementation. So the way that the process operates now with the staff and a committee versus in the future, if we're looking at, like, do we want to know about kind of the background feasibility within those other communities as well, if there's a pricing structure, like a permitting and review process, and if those reviews cost more than our current process to the city, because I think going forward with some of those recommendations, if the recommended process is more successful but may require more resources to implement beyond that first price tag of the evaluation, having kind of a cost analysis of the effort, the recommended effort would be, I think, a detail to add in as a bullet point. So
I think ultimately that's going to be up to City Council, because they're the ones who are going to create the RFP and move forward if the budget will allow for it. don't know if we need
But
to
it,
have that exact language in here.
I think what I understand Commissioner Sauvé saying is whether adding, whether what their recommendations are end up adding a bunch of cost to the process.
Yeah.
Not the price tag for the person who's
Yeah.
executing the RFP.
So-
So an analysis of like how it will impact our process and, you know, if we're adding more months to this, what does that mean? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
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 so if we add a bullet point that includes, just like an analysis of the frequency of the design review process, if we have an analysis of the price of the procedure to go through the design process to the city and to the applicant.
Or any changes
yeah.
to the,
All right.
maybe.
Do you want to propose the language and a bullet point and where you'd like that
Commissioner
bullet point?
Mills, can you help? Do you understand?
I do, and I was actually going to suggest that under performance evaluation, the fourth bullet has 2 sub-bullets. So how I read that fourth bullet, evaluation of design review process compared to best practices, is what's the volume of applications, then we're supposed to be understanding the effectiveness of the design guidelines versus these best practices. You could add a third sub-bullet that says, like, cost of implementation.
Cost implications or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Does that sound reasonable?
Mhm. Just
So,
Well, I have the floor. Can I have another thing?
let me just clear up. So it would be under performance evaluations, 1, 2, 3, fourth bullet, then third sub-bullet that states cost implications.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And so the very last bullet under implementation recommendations, originally as I was reading this and as we were talking about it, I thought it was, okay, let's look at what we're evaluating, or like what we currently have evaluated against best practices and like give us a report. The way that I read this, the presentation of recommendations and adoption by design review, planning commission and city council, are you also reading that like we would expect that this effort to take us through making whatever changes are necessary to implement whatever this process comes out with? It's the adoption by that. If we can have it evaluated and come up with something new for that price, that's not so expensive. But I don't know that that's the intention. Did anybody else see that? So it says, so I just read this as recommendation, like an evaluation of our current system and recommendations, but the very last bullet says a presentation of recommendations and adoption. I don't know what we're adopting.
And I think I think what we have to remember is that this document is just a recommendation to city council, and then city council from there will take it to the next level if they want to. And they may or may not want to go through the process of recommendation adoption, but I think ultimately if we're gonna hire a consultant and spend $75,000 to $150,000, we probably would like to adopt something at that point after spending our.
But we don't always. So that's why I think
That's
like,
true, but I think the ultimate goal should be that we are going to adopt something in the end. So I guess I don't see a problem with that personally, unless other commissioners see an issue with that. Commissioner Ackerman?
I don't know if it's the case here, but occasionally the term adopt is used with respect to studies or plans, just to say that it is now part of our planning documents.
got it. So not like, hey, we're actually gonna implement.
Implement would probably be the next step.
Rats. Okay.
Again, not having drafted this myself and not knowing the intention of the author.
Okay, so just to be clear, if city council says, yep, we want to fund this, what you are I think we should know what the outcome would be. So that is, we would have this study that's going to look at what we do, what people like and don't like. I'm trying to summarize here. What people like and don't like, what people like and how they may like or not like what happens in other cities that we could bring back here, compare how what we do compares to those other cities, come up with recommendations for how we can move towards a process that gets us the buildings that we see in other cities that we like, and have a report that lays that out, that we would say, yep, we agree with this, but not necessarily move the next step to make those changes yet. Does that? Okay.
The report may say that everything's great. You guys are doing
Right.
a fantastic job.
We didn't drop 150.
It could.
Okay, all right. I wanted to add that last step in there for that price, but okay. Thanks.
All right.
Question?
Further, Commissioner Woods.
This may already be implicit in what we're talking about, but under cost implications, or maybe right beside it, is there a way that we can get information back to us about the, perhaps the number of folks in these other communities? Like if they've got this big planning department which can do everything and anything, then I think that's different than the, perhaps, another community which may be limited in terms of how many folks work in its planning department and what they can do, what's on their agenda or their work scope or whatever we call that. Would that come under cost implications? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, do this, they're doing it great, and then we say, well, yeah, look at their budget. They ought to be doing great stuff. Or is that something that kind of comes when you have your study, and that's what the consultant would look at anyway?
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
Commissioner Gabrandel.
When based on what you're saying, I look at, okay, we need numbers next time, not bullets, don't we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, under the evaluation of voluntary process versus codified design. That the 5 to 10 comparison communities based on size of community, physical development pattern of community, market comparison. It seems like that market comparison is getting into, we're trying to find things that are similar to us. That's what I see that as saying, that the market we wouldn't do something that is wildly different than us in terms of a comparison community. That's how I would, that it would be taken up within that language. And that if you want to modify that bullet to kind of include it, that would be the place to do it if you feel like it doesn't say it clearly enough. But that's where I feel like they're getting at it, is the market comparison.
I would also, if you wanted to add something where it says volume of applications, so maybe we can do volume of applications and size of the planning department or role or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Planning capacity.
Yeah,
Planning capacity
planning
or
capacity.
something.
Planning resources, because resources is human and.
Yeah, so volume of applications and planning resources.
Where are you?
I'm in
Which bullet
performance
number?
evaluations, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth bullet, number 1, volume of applications and planning
Okay.
resources.
Okay.
Would we like to add that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Because I know there are, when Ann Arbor, depending on what we're doing, we have what we call our other communities comparable. And sometimes it's, our people that we sort of are our competitors, so to speak, as being the best, of course. So, and those could have different, it changes depending on what you're actually looking at, so.
Commissioner Mills?
Thank you for letting me talk again. Commissioner Woods brought up something, as she was talking, I realized that bullet that I added in that same section on the cost of implementation or cost of process, I think it's important to evaluate, as you were talking, Commissioner Sauvé, I was thinking about like how costly is this going to be for the city, but I also think that we should add something about cost of development. Getting to the affordability, because I know that we often talk about these, that we want to see beautiful buildings, but we don't want to make it so costly that we can't expect it, or that people will make it more unaffordable. So I would want to make sure that whether that's taken care of by finding our comps, or I want to make sure that affordability is referenced somewhere in this document. So it could be, I see, maybe it's a fourth sub-bullet there. One being the cost to our planning process, but the second is the cost of, on the private developers.
How about cost of affordability?
Cost of affordability.
Because it could include a cost of affordability for people who are renting or buying, and the cost of affordability for developers. Because I think you bring up a great point there, because in the end, it's not only what it's going to cost developers. Ultimately, that is passed down to
right
buyers or renters.
So implications on affordability or something like that.
So the fourth bullet will be what?
I would say implications on affordability, on housing affordability. Oh, boy. But it sounds like perhaps Commissioner Ackerman may want to modify that.
Commissioner Ackerman.
I think we have a lot of planning documents and the county's affordable housing needs assessment, all of which say very explicitly the longer a project takes to go through the process, the more review required, and the more we ask of them in terms of architectural design, the less affordable it's going to be. And I think we just need to build that into our DNA of how we think about trade-offs and how we make decisions. I think any product of this will be implied that it makes housing more expensive.
So we'll still leave the fourth bullet.
I think that maybe that's something, point well taken. I wonder though if it's our goal of making sure that we are continually reminding ourselves that this may come with a price tag and encouraging the consultant to put a price tag on that for us. But I don't know what other people think.
Commissioner Sauvé?
Could we just amend for project and process cost implications? So it covers the project, the developer, the building owner, those project cost implications, what it means for that site and the implementation of that design, and then also the process cost implications as it relates to the city and the planning process and those things.
So changing the third bullet to, instead of cost implications, project and process cost implications.
Yes.
And then getting rid of the fourth bullet, which is currently implications of unaffordability.
Sure.
As long as when this is translated into the actual.
As long as when this is translated into the actual RFP. Should council decide to issue an RFP, that the consultant knows what we mean by that.
Right. Commissioner Briggs?
One final thought for me, just in terms of what Commissioner Ackerman was saying in terms of the implications of this necessarily sort of suggests that we're leading to a more expensive process. I don't think that has to be true. If we're looking at best practices, we might find that, what we have to remember is that obviously we're in a voluntary process right now. And so, there's, listening to many tables go around and have these sort of discussions that we're having tonight about, well, wouldn't it be nice, as opposed to just firmly saying, hey, this is what our community would like to see, may it speed up the process and hopefully end up with a better product and hopefully, maybe we accomplish both things. So I don't think we necessarily have to think of this process as increasing the cost of development in Ann Arbor. Hopefully we can, shorten the process and improve the design in our community as well. An ideal world.
Further discussion? On that positive note.
You can always hope, right? Always hope, right?
All right. All those in favor of this I see some, we're ready to vote?
Yeah.
All those in favor of this document, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, it's approved. Moving on to 11, audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Seeing no one, we will move on to commission proposed business. Are there any commissioners who'd like to propose any business? Commissioner Briggs.
Yes, I would. Once, thanks to I assume students are in the audience who've had to listen to a particularly painful planning commission discussion around bullet points. It was bad tonight. But in terms of commission proposed business, there were a couple things that came up around biking, and I really think Transportation Commission, Commissioner Trudeau should take on looking at Class A, B, and C bicycle parking. And then also I heard a mention of, and maybe this is just necessarily a part of the process, but to get a bike hoop into the right-of-way requires city attorney review, and that's a cumbersome process by an applicant to think about just getting a bike hoop into our right-of-way outside of the DDA, like, yeah. Maybe this is something that Transportation Commission could take a little bit of time to look at those processes and make some recommendations on how we could improve. Would be my thought.
Thank you.
So,
Commissioner Trudeau.
so Transportation Commission has been asked to look at the Class A, B, and C designations. And when it first came around, there was very little interest in revisiting them. And I don't know if that was me and or staff not sort of describing the problems we've seen from this end. We have not talked about bike hoops outside of downtown. So definitely that's something I will raise. I guess I would be interested in having a conversation maybe offline about what are the problems we're seeing with Class A, B, and C, because we had a lot of questions for staff, and actually I might follow up with staff too, because we had a lot of questions for staff in that meeting about we just don't know about especially the Class A spaces, are they sufficient, are they not? We don't know because we don't see them and we don't live in those buildings, and so it's hard to tell. But there didn't seem to be a sense when we discussed it that at least the publicly accessible spaces in the downtown area, which I think we may have asked specifically about downtown, were problematic. So maybe expanding that a little bit and hooking into this issue of especially hoops outside of downtown, which I agree, that's something I flagged as not ideal. It shouldn't be so hard. If people are willing to spend the money to put them in places where we think we need them, we should let them do it. So.
Any other commission proposed business? Commissioner Woods.
Well, just to bring the birds back into this conversation a little bit, you know, I don't know if the Transportation Committee will look at that or anything, but I've seen a couple of the bikes around campus, and some of them are just laying over on the sidewalk. I don't know if that's because they just fell over or what it is, but, you know, they're in the right-of-way or what have you, and I don't have a problem with that unless somebody gets hurt if they fall or accidentally run over it with their own bikes while they're doing that. So maybe this is a question you can find out whether or not they should be, or if they are designed to sort of sit upright or be, you know, propped up someplace, or if we need to look at other kinds of hoops or something. But, you know, they could be an accident just waiting to happen, too.
Commissioner Trudeau.
So we did have a discussion at the last Transportation Commission meeting about micromobility operators in general and the bird scooters in particular. We haven't taken any action yet. It seems like the city was still trying to figure out their response and their approach and their plan. It sounds like there may be a committee to form. I think there's some discussions that still need to happen before we figure out what to do. I did read something today, and I don't have it in front of me, and I'm working from memory, that the city was looking at capping the number of vehicles per provider and then licensing providers, because we're expecting more of these operators to come. Bird is, and actually multiple, and the city did indicate multiple operators have been in discussions both with the city and the university, up to Bird launching, and Bird came without talking to anybody and just showed up, which did not go over very well. And so that's sort of being worked on, and I'm particularly personally interested in where this goes as well, and so I've been following this, and I'd actually encouraged Transportation Commission to take this up before the birds came, and it was a little bit of a told you so moment, but yeah, so the conversation's underway. Exactly how the process will go is not yet determined. I'm curious to see whether council's going to pick up anything or whether the city administrator is going to be leading the way. But yeah, it's going to be an ongoing conversation, I think.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Yeah, so just a little bit more detail. I submitted a number of questions to the city administrator earlier this week and got some helpful responses that I'd love to share if people are interested. First, the responsibility is going to sit with John Fournier, who's the new deputy city administrator. So someone is tasked with moving regulations forward, and so you can expect those to happen in short order. So my first question was, what will the city communicate publicly about our policy? The city's communications will focus on safe behavior on crowded sidewalks. This will address both scooters and bicycles, motorized and not. This is now a work in progress, so more active communication will be coming out of City Hall. Will the city remove scooters from the right-of-way? We will continue to remove scooters that are improperly stored along the sidewalk, e.g. blocking the sidewalk to prevent an ADA compliant pathway. So if you do see that, I would encourage you to call the Community Standards Department, because we are actively going out and removing and confiscating scooters that are a hazard. Third, will AAPD issue tickets to users? The response, we will ticket only in cases of aggressive behavior or when unsafe conditions are observed. We do need to develop and bring to council appropriate ordinances. 4, what are your goals in negotiating with Bird? Because in an earlier email, he had said that we're in active negotiation with them. Our goals are to allow safe operation. We'll look to create a business licensing program, which would also include a cost per scooter. I spoke to the city manager from Columbia, Missouri yesterday, and they charge $1 per scooter per day, and a recovery charge for Bird to reclaim their confiscated equipment. We also want to have access to their usage data, and we'll ask Bird to partner with us on a use and safety video.
Commissioner Trudeau.
So just 2 other points that conversation made me recall is, one, the apps do actually require the user to show that they parked the scooter. So they're trying to at least enforce proper behavior. So typically if you see something not where it should be, hopefully that's because it got knocked over or moved by somebody else. So they're at least making an effort. And I'm glad the city's moving forward with these regulations. I think setting expectations for behavior and, charging a fee to help offset the cost of managing this on our end as a city and all of that is good. And then the other thing, I already forgot, so I will let it go.
Any other commission proposed business? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Briggs, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.